So in the last lesson, we've incorporated a progress bar into our design, and we've figured out how we can change the amount of progress that it shows by updating a number that essentially represents a percentage from 0 to 100. And that number has a data type of a float, so it's a floating point. And 1.0 is completion, so 100%. 0.0 is the starting point, so it's 0%. Now, we know that we've managed to get the seconds remaining variable to reduce itself by 1 every time, but we're still a little bit far from what we want, which is for the progress bar to show the amount of time that's left. So in order to solve this, we have to think about it logically. And so here's what we know so far. We're going to need a percentage that's expressed as a floating point or a decimal number. So for example, 56% would be 0.56. And we need that percentage to increase from 0.0 to 1.0, representing how far along our egg is. So from just put into the pan all the way to finished boiling, at least for the chosen hardness. Now, the next thing we know is that we have a different amount of time to count down depending on which egg hardness was selected. So soft eggs require a total of 300 seconds, hard eggs require 720. Now, we also have a function called update time that can do something every second because it gets called by our timer, which ticks every second and triggers update time. So at the moment, we've got this variable called seconds remaining, which basically shrinks by 1 every second, and we're printing it out. But we can't really use it directly in our progress bar. So what if we thought about it the other way? What if instead of having a seconds remaining, we had something called seconds passed, and we look at how seconds passed varies compared to the total amount of time that the particular egg hardness requires. So then we can track our progress from 0 to 90 depending on how many seconds passed out of the total time. So effectively, we can express this as an equation. We could say that the percentage progress is equal to the seconds that have passed divided by the total amount of time that the egg requires. Applying that logic to our code then involves a couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to delete this line of code because we don't need it. We're not updating the progress bar in the IB action. And the second thing is that notice I've still got these quick and easy to test seconds, 3, 4, and 7. And I'm not going to change this until the very end when we are actually ready to wait 5 minutes for our egg to be done. So at the moment, we have our seconds remaining, and I'm actually going to delete this variable and replace it with two others. One is total time, which I'll set to 0, and another is the seconds passed. So this seconds passed, unlike seconds remaining, is actually going to go up. So it's going to go from 0 to 1 to 2, whereas seconds remaining counted down from the total amount of time. So the place where we need to set the total amount of time for our egg is, of course, here. So instead of setting seconds remaining, the total amount of time is going to be based on the hardness that's selected. So it's either going to be 3, 4, or 7. And then we need to have this seconds passed variable increase by 1 every single second. So instead of minus equals, we change that to plus equals. So now seconds passed is going to go from 0 to 1 to 2 every time update timer is called, which is every 1 second. So now I'm going to delete this print statement, which uses that old seconds remaining. And instead of checking for whether seconds remaining is greater than 0, I'm going to check to see if the seconds passed is less than the total amount of time. So let's say that we selected the soft egg in our button selection. So the total amount of time gets set to 3. And the first time update timer gets called, second passed is 0, total time is 3. So 0 is less than 3, and therefore seconds pass gets increased by 1. And then the next time and the next time until seconds passed is equal to 3, at which point it's no longer less than total time, at which point our egg is done. So this if statement is the place where we're going to update our percentage progress. So just before we increase it, we're going to create a new constant called percentage progress, and we're going to set it equal to the seconds passed divided by the total amount of time. And so now we have this thing called percentage progress, and we're going to set that as the progress bar's progress property. So we'll set that equal to percentage progress. Now we're going to have an error though, because it says that the percentage progress has a data type of a whole number, but the progress bar dot progress needs a floating point number. And we can verify this by again holding down Option and clicking on that. Percentage progress is in fact an integer. So how can we convert an integer into a float? Well, Xcode seems to know. It says, well, why don't you wrap your percentage progress inside a float? So let's try it, and you'll see that Xcode doesn't always know what it's doing. So if we click Fix and we try to run our code, and we press on our button, you can see that it goes straight down to 0. In fact, our progress bar doesn't do anything other than just make the progress go down to 0. So what's going on here? Well, this is a bug in our code, and like the olden days where the computers would get a moth stuck in it and some bit of circuit won't work, in modern days we don't have to worry about moths so much, but we do have to worry about ourselves. We are our own greatest enemies, and our fallacies and logic leads to our code breaking and not working. In the next lesson, we've got a 5-step process. Again, 5 steps. I really like the number 5. And it's a 5-step process for you to figure out how to debug any problem you come across. So join me on the next lesson where we're going to fix this.